to be able to expose it to user in a way that creates business value. So I'm told that one of the banks in London, for example, advertises itself with pride in terms of the mobile application it has. Not in terms of its banking products, but in terms of the mobile applications. It's about interaction. It's about the engagement model. So with this engagement model and with these systems of interaction, we have some challenges. Right? So there are 1.2 billion smartphone users out there. And these systems of records, which have been kind of isolated, are now open to all sorts of challenges. For example, hacking. Right? And you have the Internet of Devices, in the Internet of Things, for example. Right? Things connected together, which generates billions and billions of data. Right? And if somebody asks you what is the oil these days, it's data. Data is the natural oil. It's a gold mine because you can get valuable insights from data if you know how to use it effectively. And that's the differentiator. And that is where it becomes extremely important to understand the challenges and react to it. So by the way, as Nidesh mentioned, I want to make it an interactive session. So what I plan to do is I can go through my slides very quickly, and then we can get into a question and answer session, a dialogue. Right. It's about continuous delivery and continuous deployment, not about continuous speech. So innovation depends on our ability to come out with something rapidly. That will be the differentiator. Businesses want to differentiate in terms of technology. It doesn't matter whether it's a technology organization or not. So that's the need. And you want to integrate your backend systems in a way that you can provide additional value to your clients. It's not enough you have these backend systems in silos. You need to be able to extract meaningful information from them and to expose them in a way that can be useful to your clients. As I mentioned, again, software is the differentiator. It can make or break your business. So, and how do you enable the software supply chain? I lead one of the teams in IBM, which is a pioneer in the area of crowdsourcing. I hope you all are familiar with crowdsourcing. It's nothing but what we used to practice in open source. So one of the teams I lead in IBM is the Eclipse open source team. So a lot of these practices, what we follow, we got it from our experience in the Eclipse open source development community. Right? These days, we don't build everything from the ground up. We want to leverage the components out there. I'll talk about that a little more in detail. You have heard about a term called API economy. Right? We'll come to that. But it's about leveraging what is out there instead of doing everything by yourself. That's where the concept of software supply chain becomes more relevant. Your ability to integrate more of these components in a way that you can come up with a meaningful solution about it. So these are the technology trends, right? The mobile, we talked about that. Social business, right? It's about the reputation. How do you go about, how do you choose things? How do you make your choices? the social world around you has a big impact on how you make your choices. The feedback, your client feedback, is extremely important. It is not something that comes in via an email that sits in somebody's inbox and then appears as a statistical chart in one of the dashboards. It's not that case anymore. It's out there in the open. It depends on how many stars you get. Right? It depends on what the people whom you trust are doing. That's what social is all about, the social business. Big data, we talked about that. Right? We have variety of devices, smart devices interconnected with each other, generating billions and billions of bytes of data, right? Which is a gold mine for information, insight, or intelligence. Right? So you should be able to deal with that. And cloud. There are these companies. So previously there are organizations whom we call as born on the web. Right? For example, Facebook is an organization that is born on the web. Right? And these days we talk about companies who are born on the cloud. We'll see more of that. And then come to, we already talked about the intelligent devices. We talked about, and it's about the instrumented products, for example. Whether it is your car or whether it is your home security system, for example, right? They have intelligence. And even in Bangalore, you would have seen there are builders who are advertising their property in the name of technology. Right? What is the most important thing in real estate? Location. Right? So you would have seen most of the builders previously marketing their properties on location. But these days, I've seen builders who market their properties based on what kind of technology they offer in your home. Right? So technology has moved on to be an integral part of our life. So these are the statistics. More than 70% of our resources are focused on maintaining existing system or infrastructure or projects, right? Which means we have only 30% left to do the creative, innovative work, right? And what keeps you in business? Previously, the sustaining your products used to keep you in business, right? But that's not enough anymore. You have to reinvent yourself. So if you keep doing what you have been doing all along, it can actually push you further behind. Right? So that's one challenge. Okay, so that means we have to innovate more often. That means we need to come up with newer concepts to a market faster. Okay, let's do that. What's the outcome? About 80% of them are rolled back, which means these are all missteps. You're not doing the due diligence, or you don't have the infrastructure to do the due diligence. And I talked about the software supply chain. I mean the componentized model, right? More than 50% of the partner projects fail, and that's because your inability to get into the rhythm. So there is a rhythm to it, right? When software teams work together, there is a rhythm to it, and you should be able to get into the rhythm. And so this is another important point. How many of you have given a serious thought about the fact that the moment you check in your code change, from that moment onwards, how much time it takes for that change to get into the hands of a user? What's the average time? Because that determines your maturity in terms of DevOps. And the average time is 4 to 6 weeks. So that is something we need to pay close attention to. And I would say 4 to 6 weeks is maybe even the best case. Right? And it's not a technology challenge many times. Right? It could be the process challenge. There are various gating factors. There are various compliance related, the legal requirements that you need to go through. Right? So you need to have a way to compress that cycle without eliminating any of the mandatory requirements. So the software innovation gives you the competitive edge. A lot of people know that, right? I'm pretty sure it should be obvious. But how many of the organizations are able to practice it? So close to 86% is aware of it, but only about 25% is practicing it. And more importantly, about close to 70% of those who actually practice outperform the competition. So that's a fact. So now let's look at how do we get there, right? What is preventing? I mean, you know you have to do this. It's very clear, right? But in reality, you're not there. So where is the gap, right? So interestingly, when doing introductions, I was observing, right? We were introducing ourselves as from development team or operations team, right? So which means we actually think of ourselves are in two different teams, right? So DevOps is a single word. It's not development operations, right? It is one team, and it's challenging because the culture of development is more about churn. It's about disruptive creativity, right? So how many times when you get a request from a client saying, I want this feature, or I have run into this bug, how many times you have told them, oh, by the way, it's already fixed in the latest release? It happens very often, right? But that doesn't help, right? Because that fix is sitting in your internal code stream. It hasn't gone out yet, right? And your path outside is through the operations team. And what does the operations team focus on? Operations team wants stability, right? It's all about the rigor. It's all about the processes. Because there are certain things that you need to take care of, right? And it could be legal compliances, as I mentioned before, right? It could be the mandatory checks that you have to go through, right? Whatever it is, there are, and again, I'm not saying these are optional, right? These are, a lot of them are mandatory. So that's a conflicting word we have, right? We have the development side of things, and we have the operation side of things, right? If we think of them as two different sides, right? The time that takes you to adopt DevOps will be longer. Because with respect to any adoption, any technological change or the process change, the most important aspect is culture. It has to be a cultural change. It happened with Agile. A lot of organizations used to follow the waterfall model, right? But it became imperative that you cannot survive in that way. Right? So there's a lot more interest in Agile. A lot more organizations practice Agile, right? So it's about, DevOps is about bringing these organizations together as just one organization. Right? So look at build, look at release, look at change, look at test, look at the requirements management, etc. Everything interconnected. Don't look at them in silos. Because these are all related. So what we want to do is, we want to be more innovative. Right? We want to put our energy and resources towards innovation. And what do you extract it out of? Right? We can do that by optimizing our operations on one side. Right? When you optimize your operations, it can give you some bandwidth in terms of effort, in terms of money that can directly feed into helping your innovation. So now with this, it's pretty clear that something has to change. Business as usual is not going to help. So that's the case for DevOps. As I mentioned, it's a mind shift. It is all about the way you look at these organizations, look at how can we optimize and how can we innovate instead of continuing as business as usual. So let's talk about the lean approach. So how many of you have read the Lean Startup? Book Lean Startup. Okay. So I had an opportunity to listen to Eric Ries, who's the author of Lean Startup, in person in one of these conferences. So he gave a very interesting anecdote, right? What led to the context of this Lean Startup model. So he was running a company which was doing gaming applications, for example, right? And he was very particular that he wanted to get something out there, try it out and see how the users react, right? And at some point when they were developing this application, they ran into a technical glitch. For example, the game involved moving a person through obstacles, right? So in one case, the person was in a room near a table instead of chairs, etc., right? Due to some challenges with the graphics application that they were using, they were not able to transport this person they were not able to move the person properly to the other side, right? And Eric is very particular that we need to get it out tomorrow. I can't pull it back. Right? So what they come up with is, they kind of made the person disappear from here and appear on this side. It's like a kludge, a workaround, right? And put it out there. So this is one thing they were not really happy about, right? Because they said it's not perfect. They want it to be really perfect. Right? So when the application went to the market, and users started using it, right? There was a pattern in the feedback that they got, right? One of the features that they loved most was the ability to transport a person. Because you don't have to negotiate the obstacles. You can, with some certain key combination, you can just transport the person. Right? They loved it. So it is extremely important to not to jump to conclusions as to what your users will appreciate. It's extremely important to test the waters, as we call it. Right? So that's what the lean approach is about: getting something out there and reducing the waste. Right? Don't waste effort or time or money in terms of doing things which may not be required immediately. You all know about the 80-20 rule, right? Many of the applications that we use only 20% of the capabilities of the application. So look at this statistics, right? 40% is what we do. 40% of what we do is in our head, right? If we can reduce it by 50%, right, then we can increase the throughput by a third. So that's what the principle of the lean approach is all about. Now let's look at DevOps. Very simply put, DevOps is nothing but your ability to take to market something very quickly. That's a very simplistic explanation. If I'm checking in my code today, I should be able to get it out there today. And that's the mission. How much time will it take? That's one of the missions. There are a lot of things involved there, right? I'm not doing enough justice by simplifying it to that extent. But if somebody asks you what is this very simple definition, this is what it is. And as you know, open source development projects already do that. Right? Every nightly build is supposed to be a usable build. Right? And they follow it with rigor. They follow it with passion. Right? So it's all about making sure that your time and energy is spent on things which are relevant and important. Right? Keeping aside the rest of the other aspects, which are required, but you need to find ways how you can reduce that cycle. Right? So it's about accelerating your software delivery. Right? You need to balance speed, cost, quality, and risk. And all four of them, as you know, they don't go hand in hand. Right? You cannot increase speed and increase quality at the same time. It's pretty hard. Right? There are ways to do it. And risk, you need to reduce the risk. Right? So that's what the DevOps lifecycle is all about, putting everything together. So now you apply the lean principles on top of the DevOps approach, right? So what are the three key points there? Get ideas into production fast. I mentioned that, right? Because many times we are not entirely equipped to make that judgment on behalf of our users, right? They know that better. It's not that we don't know, we know. But they know that better because ultimately we are doing it for them. Get people to use it, get feedback. So that's what. So once we are able to eliminate, right, any activity that is not required to achieve it, you will be able to reduce the cycle. So we are talking about eliminating certain things which are not required. We are also talking about optimizing certain aspects, right? Certain tasks that are mandatory. So this is another perspective of the DevOps life cycle, right? So in this life cycle, there are certain best practices. We call them the adoption paths, right? Or the pillars. You have the plan and measure. You have for development test, you have release and deploy, right? And you have something monitor and optimize across the board, right? So you should, for example, your ability to deliver something really quickly depends a lot on your ability to plan ahead. And then once you plan, you should be able to put together the idea or the prototype pretty fast. Right? That's what the development test is all about. And it's about having the right test to validate that you are on track. Validate that you are meeting what is required out in the market. And release and deploy. And release and deploy by itself is a major part. I'll come to that in detail. Right? It's not just about building your source code and coming up with an installer. That used to be the case, but that's not enough these days. That's not enough. And then of course monitor and optimize. Monitor and optimize has two parts to it. One is the technology part, the other one is the process part. You need to constantly monitor your process to ensure that you are doing only the things that are absolutely required, right? So that you can eliminate any waste. And you need to have the right tools so that you can take the help of tools to understand what's going on and optimize it. So I explained about the adoption task, right? So if you are a small organization, it is more about requirements, right? But if you are a larger organization, then there is something called portfolio analysis, portfolio management, right? It's about making a call as to where should you put your money. Every organization over a period of time will have a larger portfolio. It's about shifting the focus as needed. Unless you have an idea on what is out there, unless you have an idea of not only what is out there, but in terms of mapping it to the revenue and the profit impact, you will not be able to make a good decision as to where to focus your energy on. So the larger the organization is, the more important it becomes, the portfolio management becomes more important. And requirements, as you know, is extremely important, because whatever we are doing should be relevant to our users. I talk about development test, right? And when you talk about code, it's very interesting, right? Because in the 90s and the first decade of this century, it was more about the languages of the J2E, Java, .NET, etc. Right? That's all changing now. So what we mean by code is going through a big change. Right? And what is happening is the traditional programmers are becoming obsolete. Because it's not about writing these applications. And are these applications not required? Of course they are required. They're not going away, right? But the growth is on the other side. That's all. And testing. Right? Testing is another very interesting area. And many cases we come across that testing is largely done manually. Right? That's not going to scale. Not because our people cannot test fast, they can, but because of the combinations, because of the permutation combination of not only the variety of applications, but even the differences of platforms, for example. Right? In the olden days, when we had desktop applications, we had the struggle of having the desktop application to test on a Unix with Motif and or Linux with Motif, and then Linux with GTK, for example, or even Windows, right? Oh, that was a struggle. We said, okay, we'll go with web. It's much easier, right? You can reduce your testing cycle with web. Of course, the browsers, the way different browsers rendered JavaScript did pose a challenge for us, right? But it's not as complex as the other one, so we are happy about it. But now, with the mobile devices, right, the problem is back with a bang. It's much worse. We'll get to that when we talk about DevOps for mobile. And deployment and provisioning. Right? As I mentioned, deployment is not just build automation or release automation. Right? It is about coming up with different patterns that can be used for certain applications. And provisioning is all about, on the fly, standing up the image. It's not about, you don't wait for somebody to go and buy a machine, install and set up, right? It's about, on the fly provisioning